If you want to harvest tomatoes, you have to plant tomato plants or know someone who has planted them. If you want to harvest cucumbers, you have to plant cucumbers. If you want to harvest blueberries, someone has to plant blueberries. It's a reality. We harvest what we sow. We harvest what we plant. It's a reality in the garden. It's a reality in life. It's a reality in raising kids and training dogs. Yes, it's a reality in training dogs. I spent lots of money having my dog Sophie trained a couple of springs ago. The ladies at Fetch Company were intentional about what and how they taught her the commands. When Emma brought her dog in for training and they realized that the two would be together some, they used different words as the release commands. So for Sophie to be able to stop obeying a command, I use the word okay. For Bella, Emma uses the word break. They also told me that I should use her name before each command, or I should use the name before the release. So if I want her to sit, I should say, Sophie, sit. And if I want her to be free, I should say, Sophie, okay. But I got lazy and I don't often use her name in front of the commands. And so a couple of weeks ago, when we were keeping Caroline's dog, Piper, who has the same release word as Sophie, it became evident to me why I needed to keep using the name before saying okay. By not doing so, whenever I said okay, both dogs got up. Or even if I said Piper okay or Sophie okay, both dogs got up, when I really only intended for one to be released from the command. You see, we reap what we sow. That is also a reality in our country. And we are especially seeing that in terms of the racial injustices that are still present in our systems. Now, I won't go into that anymore at present, but to encourage you to consider reading some books. In fact, in the fall, we may do a couple of book studies as a congregation. The book that I am reading now and that is opening my eyes in a big way to this reality is called The Color of Compromise: The Truth About the American Church's Complicity in Racism, and I highly recommend it to you. We reap what we sow. It's a reality in lots of places. It is a reality in the church. And it's a reality in the witness of the church. Because I believe that God calls the church to be an agent of God's love and blessing in the community and world with no strings attached. For the past 21 years, as your pastors here at Community of Joy, Sharon and I have been intentional about the seeds we sow and about the seeds we encourage you to sow in the community and world. This week, I had to pay our semi-annual car insurance bill. I always go into the office to pay because I want the agent to know who I am and to recognize that I put money in their pockets. It doesn't just come from the agency, it comes from people like me and you. I've done this almost my entire career of being a driver and paying insurance. So when I went into my local agent's office this week, I said to the receptionist that it was my semi-annual visit. A voice came from behind some plants in the lobby, a person that I had not seen, and said, "That sounds like going to the doctor." Well, that started a conversation with the male voice, who turned out to be the agent himself. I know him, and he knows me. When he realized who it was that was in his office, he came out from the area from which he was seated, and we had a conversation. He began by asking what I've been up to. I replied, saying that I had been working in the community garden so that we can feed people in the neighborhood, and that I and the church had been feeding children some 150 students since school got out in March, and we were transitioning last week to feeding families through a partnership with the Maryland Food Bank each week. He seemed real intrigued. So I showed him an aerial picture of the community garden and told him a quick synopsis of what we do there and the impact it has had on that neighborhood these past 6 years. He then asked me if I had any information on that, and I asked him what he was interested in, and he said all of it. So I said, yes, let me go get my business card. When I gave him both my business cards, the churches and the gardens, he looked at them, thanked me, and said he would be in touch in the near future. He said that as an agency, they wanted to be part of some things like this in the community. You see, you reap what you sow. I don't know what he has in mind, but that he asked showed me that what we are sowing is beautiful and people want to be part of beautiful. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the church in Galatia to deal with some problems they were having. The church was expanding and they were including more and more Gentiles in the body of the church. Some Jewish Christians were pushing the leaders to impose Mosaic law on the new believers. But Paul was pushing back. The letter to the church at Galatia addresses this reality. Paul was pushing the church to look at what they were sowing because he knew that you reap what you sow. The same reality is true for us in the church today. We reap what we sow. Paul writes in Galatians 6:1, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall in the same temptation yourself." Now that's some wise advice. I've seen way too many times when a person of faith seeks to correct another person they believe is errant. In fact, the church has become known to many in our culture as a place of judgment. A group of people who point fingers and push down, and it is not good. The advice Paul is giving is to be helpful to a brother or sister who is entangled in the effects of sin, and to do it gently and humbly. We do that best from a position of as a fellow sojourner, not as one who is without sin and not as one who is elevated above the other. The moment we slip into the I am better than you mode, we are guilty of sin. Which is why Paul says, be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. When we genuinely care for and love people, it shows. We talked about this last week. The mission we are on is not a mission to notch our Bibles or count heads. The mission is to help people connect with the generous love and abounding mercy of Christ that sets them and us free from the entanglement of sin. We reap what we sow. When we stand above and point fingers or push people down, we reap people who don't want anything to do with the church or its Lord, Jesus Christ. Paul continues, share each other's burdens and in this way obey the law of Christ. If you think you are too important to help someone, you're fooling yourself. You are not that important. So what is this law of Christ that Paul talks about? Isn't that the law that gives us the right to judge others, to elevate ourselves, to look down on those who are sinners? Nope. The law of Christ is a law of grace. Jesus calls his people to love God and to love neighbor, and he defines neighbor as anyone who is in need of mercy, which is all of us, isn't it? The law of Christ calls us to be humble and not to elevate ourselves. We get into trouble and sow discord when we take on the role of judge. That's not a role that we are given as a church or as individual followers of Jesus. We reap what we sow. I have found it to be true over the years that if I am humble and seek to come alongside someone with love and blessing, that they are much more open to the possibility that Jesus loves them than if I stand above them and look down or point fingers in judgment. Paul continues, pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else, for we are each responsible for our own conduct. We are all a work in progress. None of us has arrived. There's always more work to do on me and you. And when we recognize that, we give off a positive vibe to others, and they are more attracted to Jesus than when we act like we have it all together and don't need to grow anymore in our own lives. Recently, I watched someone on Facebook try to publicly bring someone else in line with what they believed was right belief and practice as a Christian. And it didn't go too well. People really jumped on them and challenged them, accused them of all kinds of not so nice things. As I watched, all I could do was shake my head and weep at the damage that was happening to the cause of Christ. It made me really angry and really sad. And it's the exact reason that Paul wrote this letter to the church. We reap what we sow. Jesus is fully capable of defending himself and of convicting people of their sin. He doesn't need our help in that arena. And when we step in to help him, what we reap is counterproductive and ends up pushing people away more than drawing them to him. And we end up looking like arrogant know-it-alls who think they are perfect. Oh, I know those people who say they are those people say they are sinners too, but they don't act that way, especially when they're so condescending toward others. We reap what we sow. Now, I'm going to ignore verse 6 for today because it doesn't seem to fit in the conversation that I am having with you right now. In essence, verse 6 is Paul saying to the church that they ought to pay their pastors. Paul concludes this section in this way, saying, don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. See, there it is. You reap what you sow. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially those in the family of faith. Because it is true that we reap what we sow, both in life and in the church, and in the church's witness. It matters how we treat people. It matters how we conduct ourselves. Don't give up. Don't get weary in being an agent of love and blessing in our community and world. God will use our efforts to make a profound impact in the lives of others and in our own lives. Because we reap what we sow, don't grow weary in serving others. Don't give up and hunker down. Find ways to share love. Find ways to be kind. Find ways to be a blessing to others. Find ways to sojourn with people, even and especially those who are struggling. Who knows? God just may use you as the one whom will help them open their eyes to the transformative power of Christ's love and grace. Brothers and sisters, the church is beautiful. It's beautiful when we live our lives as agents of love and blessing. The church is beautiful when we obey the law of Christ by loving God and loving our neighbor. Won't you be beautiful?